It's important to think about auditing early. However, that's just to make sure that you have a plan. Typically, people who are developing L1s or L2s go through several rounds where they start with a DevNet and then maybe a testnet before releasing something that goes into production. And during that time, they go through a lot of iteration. And so when you should start thinking about an audit depends somewhat on your system. If you are planning on implementing features that are mostly complete by the time you are getting to a DevNet or a testnet, it might be a good time to start thinking about an audit. The other thing that you might want to consider is having someone perform a security review of your system so any significant bugs can be caught early. However, most of the time that we find people coming to us for an audit is after they've released an initial testnet and before they go to production. A lot of the infrastructure that we've seen tends to be quite large. And so a lot of what we do is try to determine which parts need to be reviewed and in what order. And this is because different components of your infrastructure can have different types of vulnerabilities, or different types of vulnerabilities commonly appear. And some of those we can use tools to help identify due to the scale of the infrastructure, which makes things more efficient for both the client and us. But some things need to be manually audited. And so we try to make that distinction early and communicate that with the client to make sure everyone is on board and okay with that process. However, there's many types of common vulnerabilities that we found in individual components. So for example, if you have a consensus engine, one thing that we found frequently are denial of service attacks where someone might be able to break consensus, or they might be able to prevent the network from coming to consensus and basically producing a denial of service attack. If we're talking about an execution engine, we found cases where your VM does not actually work as you expect. Some of the semantics are not actually enforced correctly inside of the VM itself, which could lead to significant bugs like double spending errors and stuff like that. And so the type of bug that typically pops up depends a lot on the system that you're developing itself and the individual components that we're auditing. We spent a long time looking at these unique systems because most of the infrastructure that we've seen is quite unique, and you can't necessarily always compare apples to apples one infrastructure project to another. And so our analysts have spent a lot of time thinking about how we can make use of tools in order to make the audit more efficient and to identify more vulnerabilities. Typically we do this by implementing fuzzers or custom fuzzers for a particular piece of infrastructure in order to help find certain types of bugs that are unique to that system, in addition to performing a manual review on the core pieces of code that really need to be correct. We've looked at a number of different unique infrastructure projects, like ZK VMs written by Linea, RISC-0, and Mina, in addition to blockchain projects written by Stellar implementing the Soroban blockchain.